I want to welcome you to this tutorial on how hackers create undetectable malware and viruses. In one of my previous courses, we looked at how hackers create malware using the Metasploit framework and a few other methods. While this malware was somewhat undetectable by most virus scanners, it was detected by other scanners. So in this tutorial series, we'll be looking at how hackers create mostly undetectable malicious viruses or trojans, etc., using the Veil framework. Veil is available on Linux-based machines. So in this tutorial series, we'll be using the CentOS 7 Linux-based machine. So firstly, I want to go to the Veil framework website. So let's open up a browser and go to the Veil framework website. So let's go in to Firefox and we will go to type in Veil framework, and this will be the official Veil framework website that I'll show you. The Veil framework is a collection of different modules. So let's go to the official website first, veil-framework.com, and let's have a look at the different modules that are available. Once you are on the website, you will see the Veil-evasion, Veil ordnance, Veil catapult, power tools, and Veil pillage. So I'll go through these options now and explain to you what each one is. The Veil evasion is a module that allows payloads to be created. So let's go through and have a quick look at the website. But this particular Veil framework allows a hacker to obfuscate the virus or Trojan from antivirus detection. So it then allows mutation of this particular program or exe file, which makes it almost undetectable by most virus scanners. So let's go to the Veil evasion, which is a tool to generate payload executables that bypass most common antivirus solutions. So this is how hackers would use the Veil evasion to then create a payload executable that bypasses the antivirus solutions. You will note that the Veil framework is also located on the GitHub website. And Veil evasion is a part of a number of modules that we will be installing shortly. As you can see, this is just one part which allows payload executables to be created that will then be undetectable by most antivirus systems. Now there's Veil Ordnance, which is a tool that can be used to quickly generate valid stager shellcode. Then we have the Catapult system, which is a module that allows for the payload to be delivered. So it's a payload delivery tool that integrates with Veil evasion. I'll also talk about the Veil pillage module, which is the module that allows post-exploitation. So allows the user to then take control, or the hacker to take control of a victim's machine, basically allowing mostly admin rights to a Windows-based machine. We also have a section called Power Tools, which is basically a collection of PowerShell projects. But for now, we want to start with the installation of the Veil framework. So to do that, we need to go to our CentOS 7 machine, and then we want to log in using the SSH command using the root user. So let's go in and do that. We have an IP address here, which we will be using. So SSH 192 with the root user, 192.168.56.102, and that will allow us to log in as root. Once that has been logged in, we can then move on to install Python. We will be using Python because Python has the program called pip, which will allow us to install different modules and allow us to create programs using Python. So let's type in the release, and you'll see here I'm using 7.2, CentOS Linux 7.2, and we have a 64-bit operating system as listed here. We now want to install the Python program because Python has a pip package manager, which allows us to install packages quite easily by using pip. So to do that, we need to run the yum install command, which will allow us to install Python. So to do that, the command for that is yum install Python. So let's type that now, which is yum install and then Python. And once that is entered, we can run this, and let's have a look at the results of Python installing. Okay, so I have an error here, and I'm leaving the error in for now because we have two IP addresses or two interface cards in this machine. Unfortunately, only one IP address has been allocated. We need to get the other IP address. Because we are running two adapters here, we have a host only adapter, and which connects directly to the machine, and then we have a NAT adapter which allows us to connect to the internet. So for that reason, we seem to have one IP address assigned but not both. So to do that, I need to go back to this section and run this command and get an IP address, which is the DH client. And once I run that, an IP address should be assigned. And let's have a look at the IP address now. And you'll see we have an IP address which is 10.0.3.15. Now I can go into the VI editor and I will take out this name server. We don't need that for now. Let me save this file. And before I run this, let me also quickly install or write down another name server, which is the Google name server. And let's call it 8.8.8.8. And let's save the file now. Let's also do a yum update, which will then give us the latest repositories and make sure we are running the latest versions of things. So let this run through, and I'll leave this here so you can actually see the whole process of the actual installation. So for now, we have the CentOS 7 machine. We are doing a yum update, and then we'll install Python after we have updated the system. We are also performing the yum update to ensure that we are not using any old repositories, and the repositories that we have on this machine are the new ones. So let this all install, and once that has been installed, we'll move on to installing Python. This process may take a while depending on firstly your internet connection and also the speed of your processor. Again, I'm leaving this in so you can actually see the process, and as you install it on your end, you can follow along with these screens. Now the yum update has downloaded all the files and it is going through the installation process. We'll just wait for the installation process to finish. And what I think I'll do in the next video is then show you how we install the modules required for Python. So let's just make sure this process works fine. Firstly, let the installation finish, and then it'll do a cleanup. And once the cleanup is complete, we'll end the video and then move on to installing the modules that are required. Again, this may take a little while because we hadn't done the update previously. We are now doing the update as we speak so that we have the next step working perfectly. So we had to make sure we had a DHCP command to get an IP address for the other adapter. The one adapter was working fine, but the other IP address wasn't available, which wasn't allowing us to update using yum. Now we decided to do the yum update, which is almost complete. And once that is complete, we will move on to installing the modules required. Again, we are building an undetectable malware or Trojan or virus, etc., as hackers would do in an environment which would then allow them to take control of victim machines. This is purely for information use only. I want to show you how hackers think and how they create malicious code that can then infiltrate networks or victim machines. This exercise is being done in a closed environment, so please make sure you are not doing this on any public machines, as there are significant consequences and possible jail time if you are caught using this in a malicious way. So now we're ready to install Python, so we can go back to typing in yum install Python. So just clear the screen, yum install Python. And once that's done, I want to move into installing pip. So let's just wait for this to quickly install. All right, now we go to a browser and I want to type in pip install to get the appropriate link for us to install pip. So let's do that, and we'll find the official site for Python. It's the second link here, packaging.python.org. We'll go here and we'll have a look at the requirements for Python. If we scroll down here, it says the requirements for installing Python. And you see here it says if you have Python greater than or equal to 2.79 or Python greater than or equal to 3.4. To install pip, we need to have these two versions, and then we also need to have a few other things. So let's just check the version of Python we have on this machine. I'm sorry, I need to put lowercase p. So we see we have version 2.75, which is not the required version for the pip package manager. So to do that, we need to go back to the requirements and let's have a look at what we need to do to get the correct version. If I scroll down, we'll see we need the setup tools, and we'll also need the wheel. So let's go down and find the links required to install that. You'll have to go through the same process depending on what version of Python you have on your machine. So let's go in, and I've found another link that allows us to either use the yum or apt-get. Because I'm running CentOS 7, I'll be using yum. Let's go in and look for the proper commands that are required to get this to work. So we need to install the wheel and the setup tools. So this link, as I scroll down, will tell us the commands. So here we have upgrade, yum upgrade. So let me copy this particular link to upgrade Python, yum upgrade Python setup tools. And let's type that command in. And as we'll see, that is already no updates required. First thing I need to do is install it. So let's just install that first to make sure we have the latest version. And as we'll see, that has worked now. So if the upgrade doesn't work, you need to go through to install that. Once this is done, we can move on to the next command, which is install python pip and the python wheel. So let's go in and do that. And as you see, this is installing. So once this is complete, we are now ready to make sure we have the latest version of Python and the latest Python wheel and setup tools. Now that has been complete, we want to move on to using pip to install one more program called the PyInstaller. So to do that, we go back to our CentOS 7 machine, and what I'll do here is make sure we type in the command pi to see the pip file has now available to us. So here we are, we see pip available to us. So we type in pip install, and we want to type in PyInstaller. So capital P Y, capital I in installer, so PyInstaller. And once that has been installed, we will be ready to move on to the next step. So pip install PyInstaller. I'll just wait a couple seconds for this to install correctly. And once this has been installed, we will move on to the next step where we will be installing the Veil framework. And here we see that PyInstaller has successfully installed. Before we finalize the installation of the Veil framework, we have a few more steps required. One of those steps is to install PyCrypto. PyCrypto is a cryptography toolkit for Python. It allows us to encrypt functions in Python, and we do need to install this specific PyCrypto. To do that, the first thing we want to do is run the yum search option to find PyCrypto. So to do that, we type in yum search PyCrypto, which will show us the PyCrypto file that we need to install. That package is listed here. Now, it also tells us we can search all. So if I type in all here, it'll show us the different PyCrypto versions that we can then install. So I'll just copy this and let's install PyCrypto before we move on to the next step. The file is called python-crypto, so I've typed in yum install python-crypto, and we'll wait for this file to be installed. Once this package has been installed, we can move on to the next step, which is installing Git. So let's just wait for this to all install okay. And the next step is to install Git. So to do that, we do the yum install again. So yum install Git, which will install the Git repository for us. And once we have the Git repository done, we can go to the GitHub website and install Veil. We will need to clone Veil. So let's just wait for this to complete. It's downloading and installing. Once we have the command prompt again, we can go to the GitHub website. You can search for GitHub and Veil framework, and that will give you the Veil framework link. I have a link opened here, so I'll just go to that link and we will see the command to clone Veil. Let's go there now, and here's the link. And if you look further down here, there's a quick install section. We can type in git clone, and I'll just copy this link, and what it will do is then clone Veil from this link. So just wait for this to install. Firstly download and then install. It might take a little while, but what we've been able to do so far is have a CentOS 7 machine. We've done a yum update and installed all the latest repositories. We've then installed Python. We've then installed pip, and we've used pip to enable other modules. We are then able to install Git, and we've also installed the PyCrypto to enable encryption of different Python functions. And now we are installing Veil. Now, once this has all installed, we can move on to the next step of actually customizing Veil and starting to use Veil to create different payloads and look at the different functions within Veil itself. Hopefully, you've been able to follow along with these examples by installing either a CentOS 7 machine, and then you've gone on to create the Python installation, the pip installation, then we've looked at the PyCrypto installation, and then we've looked at the GitHub repository installation, and finally we've got the Veil installation in this lecture. So now once this has all installed, and I'm just waiting for it to still download and install, once that has been done, we'll be able to move to the next step. So now let's set up the Veil framework. We need to do that by /setup.sh, and we will click yes here to install the Veil evasion. You will note it's telling me that the wine package and the Ming package is not available. We can install those in the following manner. What we need to do is install the EPEL repository. So it's yum install EPEL, and let's have a look. It's got nothing to do. Let's do a search. So yum search for EPEL, and let's see what the name is called. It's called EPEL release. So let me copy that, and let's do a yum install for this particular name, and let's see how the install works. And hopefully this works. The EPEL repository contains some extra repositories and packages that the Veil framework will require. So let's see, we have installed the EPEL release here. We wanted to do a yum update to make sure all the files are updated again. So we have the latest repositories. I'm just going to wait for this to install and update. But just remember that there are some updates required, especially if you're trying to use the Veil framework. So let's run the setup again and take note of any repositories or packages that are not found. We'll need to install those packages at a later stage. I noticed one in the initial setup stage. So let's go through and install this to make sure there are no other errors, and we'll look closely for any requirements, any packages that are missing that the Veil framework will require. So again, I'm going to walk you through this process. You will have a very similar screen when you are installing the Veil framework on your machine. Again, I'm taking note, and I suggest you take note of any other packages that are not found that will require you to then manually install later on. I'll show you how we install any missing packages shortly, but for now I'm just going to wait for this to all download and then install, and once that's installed we can move on to the next step. This might take a little while, just depending on your processor speed and the internet capabilities, how fast your internet connection is, but hopefully this won't take too long. And as we can see here, that part has been complete. Let's just wait a short while more to see what else is required. It's doing a few more tasks. I haven't seen any more requirements of missing packages, so that's good news. Again, I'm setting this up live. I could have done it beforehand, but I think it's important to show you exactly what is happening on my end. If there are any errors, I want to point those out because you might have similar errors on your end, and you want to know how to handle that so you are not stuck. And we're just waiting for the installation to finish, and then we can move on to the next step. Again, just be patient with the installation. We want to make sure we have a successful Veil framework working so we can then create these undetectable viruses to show how a hacker would potentially infiltrate a network. Now, again, this is in a controlled environment. Everything I'm doing is in a controlled environment. You don't want to run this outside of a controlled environment because you could run the risk of causing some serious damage to victims' computers. And if you're not careful, your IP address will be tracked and you might get a knock on your door. So you don't want any issues, you don't want any headaches. The last thing you want is to be doing this in a malicious way. It's not something I advocate, and it's shown to you here to give you an idea how a hacker thinks, how a hacker would create something of this nature, and more as an education process only. By knowing how hackers think, by knowing how hackers work, and how they create these malicious types of code, you can potentially go to a corporation and show your ethical hacking skills by being able to understand how the threat occurs. By understanding the mindset of the hacker, understanding the methods and the thinking of the hacker, this becomes an easier task for you. So there are a number of steps required to install the Veil framework. Most people would give up, but the hacker who is persistent will continue down this track. They will install Python, they will install pip, they will then go on to install PyCrypto and all the other requirements for Veil. And as you can see, there are certain packages that may be missing. Again, the serious hacker, the one who wants to cause damage, will go through all the steps to make sure they have the Veil framework working correctly so they could then create these malicious viruses that are almost impossible to detect by even the best virus scanners out there. So I'm just waiting for this to complete. It is installing some other dependencies. We're almost there. We'll just wait a short while longer and we will have the framework all working for us. Again, I'm leaving this step-by-step process in place so you can actually follow along to make sure that if you encounter any other errors, you can see on my screen and match up exactly where we are and what step we are at, so you can pinpoint errors. So we are looking here and we see there's an X server requirement. So what we can do is to go back to the prompt and we can install it in the following manner: yum install xorg minus x11 minus server minus xorg again, and this time it's installing the X server for us. As we can see here, I need to click yes, and that will download and install and then give us a complete signal that it has been completed. We also may need to install one more package, which is the X Windows system. So let me go ahead and type in a yum install command for that to install this X Windows system. We call it group install. So what it will do is then install this X Windows system for us. And once that has been done, I'll click yes. Just wait for this to download and install. And once that has been installed, we can then arrange to move to the next step. Yes, there are some building blocks required and certain steps to make sure this Veil framework works correctly. I have taken note of any missing packages, but now I want to reboot the server by typing reboot. For the packages to work correctly, we need to install a desktop environment. The desktop environment we'll be using here is the GNOME desktop. So you need to type in yum-y groups install open quotes GNOME desktop close quotes, and this process will then install the GNOME desktop environment. Once that has been installed, we want to start the X server. I'll show you how that's done shortly, but I'm walking you through the exact installation of the GNOME desktop in this particular video. It might take a short while, but you want to make sure that there are no errors, and by typing in the command yum-y groups install GNOME desktop, this process should work smoothly without any errors. And once that has been installed, we can then run the X server. So I'm just going to wait for this to load up, and then we can get started on the next step. Once the GNOME desktop has been successfully installed, we type in the command start X, and you will be presented with a screen like this, which shows the installation process. Once we click on next, we can go through the whole installation process and make sure X server starts. And once that has been completed, you will be presented with a screen that looks very much like this, which tells you you are ready to go. Here we have the ready to go box on the CentOS 7 machine. What we then want to do is go to applications and open a terminal window. So let's go ahead and do that. We can now go ahead and install Veil. So let's open up a terminal window, applications, and you will see an option called terminal under applications. We have terminal, and once we have that open, we will be presented with a terminal window, and from there we want to go to the particular directory to install Veil. So we need to make sure we are logged in properly. I'm already logged in as root, so I don't need to do anything there. Let's go to the Veil directory, cd Veil evasion, and we want to run the setup file here. So /setup.sh, and we will be presented with the setup. Just before that though, I want to make sure to look at the resolve.config file. So let's have a look and make sure the name server, that seems okay. And I want to double check the IP address for the two network cards. So let's just type in IP address, and I will just use the DHCP server to get the IP addresses so the network works. Now I can run the setup.sh file, and let's do that. We have an IP address now, so everything seems to be working okay. We run the setup.sh file, and hopefully the setup goes through smoothly. If there are any errors, I will just investigate that. Here's something that says line 175. So let me go ahead and just check that line out. The error might be, I'll just use the VIM editor to look at that line 175 and see if the error is easily identifiable. If not, we'll just continue and let's see what we can do in the setup process itself. Let me scroll down and have a look what we can do. All the packages seem to have been installed okay. Now we'll just want to configure those packages, and to configure them, what I will do is just scroll down here and make sure that if we can remove this package that talks about wine. And let me see the message that we get. We are trying to get the next step, which is the Python installation to work. So what I'll do here, it says existing Veil wine environment detected. Let me nuke this one. So I'll click yes here, and let's go through the installation process to get to where we can install Python. We'll come back to the wine environment in the next video, but for now, let's just nuke this and move on to the Python installation. Just double checking that. Yes, we'll just put yes, and then let's move on to the rest of the installation. Hopefully the installation goes smoothly at this point, and if that all works fine, we will be presented with a window to install Python. Here we have it has been finished, and now we should get the installation for the Python 2.7 release. Just wait for that to come up, and then we'll install Python. There we have the 2.7.5. You'll get this window. We will click on install for all users and click on next, and we will just make sure that this installation goes through smoothly. That looks fine. I'll click next, and let's just wait for the installation of Python to finish. And once that has been completed, we can continue with the Veil installation and start using Veil to enable our exploits to be created. So we'll just wait for Python to finish, and then we can get started in the next video. We still have a few more setup things to do. So we type in wine boot -- update, and this box will appear. You need to click on the install option and let that process go through of installing. Once that has been installed, you will get another pop-up window which will ask you to install the wine gecko. Once that is done, you need to install that as well. So I'll just wait for that window to pop up, and then we'll install that as well. This may take a short while depending on your speed of your machine and things like that. But here's the wine gecko installer. I click install, let that install. We'll also be setting up Veil, and we'll also be having to install Metasploit on this machine as well. So I'll go through those steps with you now, and I'll show you how we use the SSH command to then install Metasploit. While the wine boot is installing, we'll just wait until that has loaded up, and then we want to go to the Veil directory. That looks like it's been updated. So now we just want to go to the Veil directory and then run the setup.sh file. So let's go to that directory and then type in cd setup, then we type in /setup.sh, and that will run the setup file for the Veil program. You'll notice that it does prompt us non-Kali users need to make sure you install the Metasploit framework. So what I'll do now is show you how we install the Metasploit framework. But the first thing we do is, in this video, I'm going to show you how to use the SSH command and then basically log into that machine. And then in the next video, I'll install the Metasploit framework. So we need to log in as root. So let me go back to this terminal window, and we type in the SSH root at the IP address, and we'll wait for that to load up. And once you're logged in, I'll show you how we then install the Metasploit framework in the next video. Before we install Metasploit, we want to make sure we run the group install for development tools. If yum is already running, what we do is we do a pkill -9 and for yum. So let's make sure we kill that process, then run the process again, yum group install development tools. And these tools are required for the Metasploit framework. So let's just wait for these to download and then we'll install them. Once that is installed, we'll go ahead and download the Metasploit installer. So let's go ahead and make sure all this downloads okay. Again, depending on your connection, it may be slow, it may be fast, just depending on the speed you have on your end. I'm just going to wait for this to load up. And once we have a command to install the packages, we'll click yes, and the installation process will begin. I am showing you step by step how we go about installing the CentOS 7 operating system, how we go about installing Veil, how we go about installing Metasploit, showing you some of the errors that you may encounter on the way and how we resolve those errors. But once everything is running, you will have a great environment for ethical hacking purposes. So right now we're just waiting for all the packages to download, and then we'll go ahead and install that. And once the installation is done, we can go ahead and download the Metasploit framework, change the permissions. So I'll click yes here because we have downloaded all the packages. Now we can go ahead and install these. And once Metasploit's installed, we'll configure that and then start working on how to create our own payloads and how to evade detection by the different antivirus solutions. So I'll just wait for this to complete, and then we can go on to the next step. Just remember to watch for any errors you may encounter and take note of those errors so that we can go ahead and fix them up later on. I am just monitoring the installation process to make sure there are no errors, and you should do the same. Once the installation has been completed, we can go on to install the Metasploit framework, change the permissions, and then get started with the installation of the Metasploit framework. This is almost done. Once that is completed, we can move on with the additional steps. Remember, this is what an ethical hacker would do to create an environment. Not only an ethical hacker, a hacker who's out to do malicious things would also want to create an environment just like this so they could go ahead and create exploits. So you want to get an idea exactly how hackers think, how they work, so that you can use these techniques for good rather than doing malicious things. Remember, if you are using these types of ethical hacking tools, be careful. You don't want to get caught doing something unethically. So let's just make sure that we follow the rules and play above board. Now I just also need to install some SQLite and Java dependencies that are required by Metasploit. So to do that, I type in the following command, which is yum install, and you can see this long line SQLite devel and all the other Java kits that are required. And we'll make sure that this installs, and then we can go ahead and download the Metasploit Linux installer. There are some bits and pieces that are required for all the frameworks to work properly. So we want to make sure that we do the right thing to enable us not to have any errors later on. This is part and parcel of setting up an environment that will be successful for your ethical hacking processes. So again, I'm just running that command to make sure that we install this successfully. And I think I pressed something incorrectly just above, so I'm just redoing that. And once that's done, we can then go ahead and download the Metasploit framework. So hopefully I'll get a prompt to allow me to type in yes. And once that's done, I click yes here, and then the installation is done for these 9 packages. I'll just wait a short while these all install okay, and then we'll get the link for the Metasploit framework from the Metasploit website. And for me, that link will be listed shortly. But for now, let's just make sure the installation goes through okay. I do notice some failed sections here, which we will address later on. But once this installation is complete, we can then use the wget command to go ahead and get the Metasploit framework downloaded. And then we change the permissions, and then we will get on to the installation process. This is almost complete now, and then we'll type in wget with the link to download the Metasploit framework. So this is the link I got, downloads.metasploit.com. You'll see data releases. Yours may be slightly different, but let's just wait for the download to complete. Once the download's complete, we'll change the permissions and then go ahead and install the Metasploit framework on this CentOS 7 machine. The download is almost complete. I'll just change the permissions using the chmod command. So chmod +x is the command, and I will type in the file name for this. And now we go ahead and run the program. Latest Linux 64-installer.run. If that all has worked fine, we will get a box pop up on our screen similar to this, which then shows us the Metasploit setup process. I can click forward here and move to the next step. I accept the agreement. Let's forward to the next step. Choose a path. That's fine for now. Yes, I want to install Metasploit as a service. Forward. You want to make sure if you have any firewalls or antivirus, you need to disable that before proceeding. There may be some interference if you have an antivirus or firewall enabled. So make sure you disable that. This is the port that we will be listening in on. This is all okay. Leave that as is. And then I hit forward to then go ahead and install the Metasploit framework. I let this run for a short while, depending how long it takes. And once it has been installed, we will have our Metasploit framework here. I'm using the normal Metasploit framework, which is a free version. If you do want to upgrade later on, you have the opportunity to upgrade to Metasploit Pro, but it's not essential, especially if you're just starting out. The Metasploit framework will give you a ton of tools, a ton of options to play around and create different exploits. And then by using Veil, we'll be able to hide that from activities that are detected, like antivirus solutions and firewalls, etc. So let's just make sure this process completes. It's taken us a short while to get here because there's lots of infrastructure to set up in the beginning, but I wanted to walk you through step by step how all that is completed, errors and all. So if you encounter any errors, you can resolve those as well. So it looks like this Metasploit framework will take a short while. What I think I'll do is I'll let it run for just a short while longer, and if it doesn't complete, what I will do is go to the next video, and then we'll go ahead and use Metasploit more effectively. It looks like it's unpacking the files, and once the files are unpacked, it will then install the Metasploit framework for us. So as you can see, there is a bit of housekeeping required, but we're almost there. We have the Metasploit installation process beginning, and once that has been completed, we can move on to the next step of creating our payloads and creating undetectable malware so that we can show how it can fool different antiviruses by enabling those antiviruses not even to be able to recognize that this is a potential exploit. So let's just make sure this installation works, and we'll go ahead in the next video. Just a quick update, once the Metasploit installation has been completed, you will be presented with a screen that looks like this, which basically says completing the Metasploit setup wizard. It has the setup has been finished. It also gives us access to the Metasploit web UI, once we click the finish button. So for now, I just wanted to show you this is what the installation finished looks like, and now we'll move on to the rest of it. Once the Metasploit framework has been installed, we want to go back to the console window, and here we type in MSF console to confirm that the Metasploit framework is all working. Once it is working, we'll move ahead with the veil evasion setup. But for now, let's just confirm that the Metasploit framework is working. Here we see the starting screen, which shows that the Metasploit framework console is starting. I'll just wait for that to successfully load, and then we'll exit before we move on to the setup of the veil evasion system once we have this all confirmed. As you can see, this has shown the payloads, the exploits, etc. It has worked successfully. I'm going to exit, and in the next video we'll install the veil evasion. Now let's go ahead and run the setup file. So /setup.sh, I'll click yes here, and let's wait for the installation process to start. I'll prompt you when there are certain sections that require installation, but for now, let's just go through and nuke this previous installation, and let's go through the setup process. It's downloading and installing some packages. It'll install Capstone. It will then install Python and then repair Python as well. So we'll just wait for that prompt. Here's the Python 2.7.5 setup. I need to repair the Python installation. So I click on repair and finish. And this will then install the Python 2.7.5 files that are required by the veil evasion. Click finish. And we also need to install pywin32. So click next and next. And again, next, let the installation process of pywin32 complete. And then it will ask us to install one more file, which is coming up shortly. Just wait for this to complete, and then we'll go ahead and install the other program as well. These are all programs required by the veil evasion program. We'll wait for this to finish. I'll click finish here, and once I click finish, it should give me another installation. PyCrypto 2.6. I click next, 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 and this will install PyCrypto. Wait for that to finish, and then we'll click the finish button, and we will finish the installation of veil evasion shortly. So once that's done, I can click on finish here, and then let's look at what else is required by the veil evasion program. Remember, it's going to download and install a bunch of programs, and we'll just wait and see what else is required. I'll click OK here. This will install Ruby. I accept the terms. And I click next. I will tick all these little boxes here just to make sure we don't miss anything. Click these checkboxes, and then I'll click on install, and we'll install Ruby. I'll just overwrite the folder. Yes. You may not have this option. I've already installed it previously, so I've had to overwrite the folder. And we'll just wait for this Ruby 1.8.7 to finalize. Now we can click on Finish here to finalize the setup. And let's look at what else the veil evasion program requires. Let's just wait for the final installation to complete by clicking Finish here. We'll move on to the next step. Now we'll just wait for the rest of the packages to be installed. It might take a short while depending on your internet speed, but we are almost done with the installation, and there will be one more step required just before the finalization of the veil evasion program. We'll just wait for the last packages to be installed, and once the installation is finished, we will be prompted to put in the Metasploit directory. I'll just wait for that screen to show up and explain how it will work. Here we have the option to please enter the path of your Metasploit installation. I'll finalize this video, and in the next video we will enter the path for the Metasploit installation. One last step is to ensure we have the proper Metasploit folder listed here. So /opt/Metasploit is the folder. Once that is done, Veil will be installed successfully. We'll just make sure that is completed, and we should receive a message saying done, as we see in the second last line here. Now that has been installed, we can now go ahead and use Veil to create our exploits. We'll do that in the next video. So we now have Veil installed on our machine. If you've gotten through this process, you will now know how to install Veil on a CentOS 7 machine or even Fedora. But now I just want to explain in this introductory video of what Veil actually is. Now, if you understand antivirus software traditionally work on a signature process. They look for signatures in a virus and then detect that as a virus once they know the signature. Veil is built to bypass and prevent antivirus solutions from detecting their presence. It's done by encrypting the payload. It basically makes a random string of characters contained each time, and it is very unique in its production. So what happens though is a traditional hacker will understand this process by taking a payload. It either is a created payload or it could be a virus that is already in the marketplace, and what they do is they use Veil to create a random, basically a different version of that virus, which will bypass and evade most traditional antivirus solutions. So why would someone use Veil as part of ethical hacking training? The real reason is that Veil will be used by most hackers. Any skilled hacker would be using tools like Veil to take an exploit, maybe created through Metasploit, and use that Metasploit and use Veil on top of it to make sure it's polymorphic in nature, meaning it can change from host to host and then evade or bypass most traditional antivirus solutions. Now, why is this important? If you're working in a corporation or helping a corporation with ethical hacking, you need to understand that a skilled hacker would be looking at ways to bypass or infiltrate a network. And one of the ways is to look at the antivirus solutions that are present, find a way to mask or create a random and unique payload that can be used to exploit vulnerabilities within an organization. So if you understand how skilled hackers work and how they are using tools to figure out ways to bypass antivirus solutions, you will have a greater understanding of how to be able to prevent or stop these types of threats. So we have seen how to install Metasploit. We've looked at how to install Veil. We've looked at all the potential pitfalls and challenges that are required to overcome to get Veil working on a CentOS 7 or Fedora machine. This is important to understand because we've gone through the process because a skilled hacker would be performing these types of steps as well. Once you understand the psychology, the motivation, the reasons for a hacker, a skilled hacker, to go through this process to then enable them to infiltrate networks, you get a better understanding of why you need to understand this to help prevent these types of attacks. Any organization needs to understand that hackers out there are not using off-the-shelf products to infiltrate networks. Antivirus solutions will only protect once they understand the signature of a virus. But when a virus mutates or malware is mutated in this form, created through Metasploit, creating payloads through Metasploit, and using Veil to basically hide and change the shape of the actual malware, it makes it almost impossible for traditional antivirus solutions to detect. So before we begin, I just wanted to give you an overview of exactly what it's going to take to be an ethical hacker, to understand the psychology of hackers, so that you can prevent these types of attacks. It makes you a very well sought after professional to help organizations prevent these types of attacks. Now, we'll be using Metasploit to create a payload. We'll then be using Veil to change the malware, and then we'll look at how this malware is basically undetectable by most antivirus solutions. A hacker would perform these types of steps to take their payload, run it through an antivirus solution prior to looking at infiltrating a network. Because once they've got access to a network, they can obviously change data, steal data, manipulate data to their advantage, and release the data potentially out into the marketplace. This is a real threat. It's a very significant threat, especially as we move into this highly digital age, because these types of payloads could also infiltrate Android networks, mobile phone users, and it opens up a whole new kettle of fish when it comes to what hackers are able to do. So now we'll go ahead, now that we've installed Veil, we've installed Metasploit, we'll look at how we can use Metasploit to create a payload and take that payload and use Veil to make it undetectable by most antivirus solutions. Hackers could potentially also take a traditional virus, run it through Veil, and also create an undetectable virus. Now let's go ahead and create an exploit. We are now using a CentOS 7 machine. The other machine that we'll be testing on is a Windows 10 machine. We have the latest operating system. We have the latest antivirus installed on that machine. What we have in our controlled environment is two machines. One will be the attacker machine and one will be the victim machine. The Windows 10 machine will be the victim machine, and this, the CentOS 7 machine, will be used as the attacker machine. Just as a disclaimer again, this exercise is being done in a controlled environment. You do not want to be taking Veil and using it on unsuspecting victims, because there are significant penalties and potential lawsuits against you if you are caught. This exercise right now is being done in a closed environment that we own both machines, and we are using this purely as a demonstration purpose only. So the first thing we need to do is go to the Veil directory and run Veil. You do not want to be using these exploits on any unsuspecting victims, as there are significant penalties for doing so. This is being done in a closed environment. So the first thing we want to do here is go to the Veil directory. We've already installed Metasploit. We've already installed Veil. Now we want to run the Veil program, and we do that by going to the Veil directory, which is cd veil-evasion. And within that directory, we're looking for the veil-evasion.py file here in green. Let's run that file, and then I'll explain that dashboard to you. Once we have that dashboard visible, let's run the program, and you'll see it shows up Veil Evasion 2.2.7. You'll see there are 51 payloads loaded here, so there are already payloads within Veil that we can use. And there are some available commands that are listed here as well. I'll go through those commands, but you can see 51 is written in green, and these payloads are already available for us. If we want to get information on a specific payload, we simply type in info and the number of the payload, and we will get information about that payload. The rating, how effective it is, how dangerous it is, etc. If I want to get a list of all the available payloads, I simply type in list. We'll do the list shortly, and then look through the list of payloads that are already available. There are a bunch of payloads available, so let's just go through some of them. You'll see they all have unique numbers next to them. We also have scripts or payloads written in Ruby. We have them in Python. We have PowerShell. We have even web server exploits and payloads that are listed here in 45, 46, 47, etc. We have the reverse TCP. We have PowerShell. We have injection payloads. You can play around with the different payloads to figure out what information each one has, how potent they are, etc. But for now, if you wanted any specific information on a payload, I can simply type in info and the name of that payload or the number of that payload. And as you can see, there are HTTP, HTTPS, reverse TCP, there's bind TCP. There are quite a few different payloads that you could be using. So let's go up and have a look what else there is. There's PyInstaller wrappers, there's Cold War wrappers. Again, you can find information on all these different types of payloads when you get an opportunity to do so. If I want the info on this particular reverse TCP payload, I can simply go and type in info and then type in the number, which here is, let's look at number 49. So once we type in 49 for this particular payload, we should see some options of what we can use to create that payload. Here we have the name, the language it's written in, the rating, normal rating here, the description of what it is, and there are some required options. As you can see, the current values in the middle column, which we would need to set for the payload to run correctly, because it'll compile that payload for us and create something that is quite random, that is going to bypass most antivirus solutions, which we'll then test on a Windows 10 machine shortly. Now let's go back to the list, and I want to look for the Python interpreter reverse TCP, which we'll be using here, and that number is 34. So to create the payload for that particular reverse TCP, we need to firstly note down the number 34, and we want to go back to the command line and type in info and that particular number. Once we type in info 34, it will then present the information about the payload for us and show us the options required to create the payload. So let's go in and type in info 34, and we will then be presented with a screen that will show us all the options for that particular payload. It will tell us the rating of the payload and also give us the required options to then create the payload correctly. Let's have a look at the info here, and as you can see, it does give us a number of required options. To use the payload, we simply type in use and then the number of this payload that you had noted down previously, which was 34. So we type in use 34, and it will then present the screen which now says the payload has been loaded. Now we see the reverse TCP listing here in the bottom section, and we now have to set the different options. So firstly, we want to set the lhost, which will be the IP address of this machine which has Metasploit and Veil installed, this machine being the attacker machine. We want to run the file on the victim's machine and then open up the port back to this attacker's machine so we can take control of their machine without them knowing that we have installed a malware device on their machine. Now let's go ahead and type in set lhost, and let me get the IP address of this machine. We are using this in a closed environment, so it will be a local IP address within the network. As you can see, there's the compile to exe, which says yes. We have set lhost, and the IP address for this machine is 192.168.56.101. So we have the IP address for this machine. Veil, Metasploit have been installed, and once we set the lhost, we can then view the actual options again. And let's have a look at the options if lhost has been set. So we type in options here, and we look at the options. We see now the lhost has been set to the IP address of this machine, the attacker's machine. So lhost has been set. We're using the L port of the machine, which is 4444. We can change that port if we want to. I won't be changing it here, but just to understand, this is how we can change these settings. You simply type in set, you type in the name of the component you want to change, and then type in the value. Now to generate the payload, we type in generate. We need to create a base name for the output file, which is default is payload. We want to call this something like game. What we want to do is then create the executable file and then take the executable file on an USB device and take that to the Windows machine to show how it is able to bypass the antivirus solutions. So I simply type in game here, and once I press enter, it tells me how would you like to create your payload executable. I can use PyInstaller and a few other options here. I will just use one for now, keep it as the default. So we use PyInstaller, press 1 and press return or enter. And what will happen now is it will create the payload for us. Once the payload is done, it will give us a path name. I will go to the path name and then take the executable file from there and put it onto a USB device. Now this screen will take a short while to create the payload. It may require me pausing the video and then coming back shortly. But what we'll see here is some warnings. That's no problem. And it will go through and create the payload for us. And once the payload has been created, we will be presented with a screen that looks very similar to this, which now says your payload files have been generated. Don't get caught. Again, this is done in a closed environment. You don't want to be using it in an uncontrolled environment on an unsuspecting victim. There are huge penalties and you don't want to be going down that path. Use this for ethical means only. As you'll see here, the path name is listed as z:/root/veil evasion/dist/game.exe. So that's the encrypted file that Veil has created for us. We want to take this particular file, put it onto a USB device, and then take it to a Windows 10 machine with the latest antivirus software, and then install it on that machine, which we'll be doing in the next video. So this video has just been able to show how to use Veil to create a very simple payload using the options of the reverse TCP and also encrypting that file in a random way so we can then potentially infect the victim's machine, which we'll do in the next video. Again, this tutorial is being run in a controlled environment. A skilled hacker would be using email, or like we saw in the Mr. Robot TV show, hackers could potentially use it on a music CD that then the unsuspecting victim puts on their machine. Now let's get to the fun stuff of installing this game.exe file on our Windows 10 machine. So I have two machines here, two virtual machines. This CentOS 7 machine is the attacker machine where we created the payload with Veil. Now we're going to go to the Windows 10 machine, which is also a virtual machine, but also will be used as the victim machine. So let's go to the Windows 10 machine now, and I'll show you how we can install the payload here. Now, if I go to the Windows options, I want to look for the Windows Defender just to confirm what is available. So we have the default Windows Defender desktop application here. If I click on this, you will see that it is running and it is up to date. So with that in mind, let's just confirm that is the case. As you can see, real-time protection is on and virus and spyware definitions are up to date, which confirms that this machine is up to date with the latest antivirus. Now, what we want to do is then go ahead and download the game.exe file from our previous machine and load it up on this machine. If I had two physical machines, I would have copied the game.exe file on the CentOS 7 machine to a USB drive and then move the USB drive to this machine. Because we are running a virtual machine environment here, let's just confirm what version of Windows 10 is running here so you can actually see the settings on this particular machine, and then we'll go ahead and download the game.exe file. So within Windows 10, I just want to see what this PC settings are. So let's click on this and we will see the properties for this machine include that this is a Core i5 machine. So let's just confirm all the settings are correct. Here we have the Core i5 We have 1.46 gigabyte of installed RAM. It's a 64-bit operating system, Windows 10 Pro, and it's not a top-of-the-line spec machine, but it's working well. It's running Windows 10, and we can now go ahead and go to the other machine and get the executable file that we will then copy to this machine. Now I'll talk about a couple settings that we had created in the payload and then explain to you how we can detect that on this machine. So let's also get the IP address of this machine. So I want to go to the network settings, and we have two Ethernet connections here. One's Ethernet and one's called Ethernet 2. And what we do here is just check the IP addresses for the two different ones. We see this is the one connected to internet. This is the other Ethernet cable that we want to get the IP address for. This is the address 192.168.56.103. We also want to make sure the firewall is disabled for now, so that we can get the file working on this machine. So let's go ahead and check. Yes, the firewall is disabled. So now we can begin getting that game.exe file and moving it to this Windows 10 machine, and then check whether it is detected as malware or virus by Windows Defender. Let's go ahead and get the file from the other machine, and what I'll do is copy that to a virtual USB drive, and we will then make sure the USB is enabled on both machines. As we can see here, we've got a path listed here in green. What I want to do is copy this path, and then I want to copy the payload to, I'll just put a copy command in the beginning of this and copy it to the root directory, so we can then move it to the USB drive. So let's put in root here, which will then copy the file. So we have the game.exe file. If we look here, we will see the game.exe file listed here on the left hand side. And now we can download this, and if we download it, we can then set the path to the USB drive, the virtual USB drive, and it will then be available to us when we run the Windows 10 machine. So let's go ahead and go to this PC. We have USB 3 here. I'll move it to USB 3. Now that's copied. Once that's been copied, we can go back to the Windows 10 machine and make sure that it is enabled there. So all I did was download it to this USB drive, and that would have made it available on that drive. On the Windows 10 machine, if I go to the Explorer and let's have a look at that folder, if we can find that drive. If the drive is not visible, as we'll note here, the drive is not available. It means that I haven't mounted the USB drive. So let's go ahead and make sure that we mount the drives correctly. Let's go back to both the machines under shared folder settings. Let's go ahead and do that and make sure that we share the folders correctly on both machines. So once I click on this shared folder settings, we will see the shared folders here. And let me go to the other machine and do the same here and mount the proper folder correctly. And once we mount these, we'll be able to see that folder on both machines. So once we see the screen load up under shared folder settings, we click on machine folders, and here I can select the folder path, other, and folder name. Let's find the USB drive under this PC. Scroll down, here we have the drive, so I select that drive, make it read-only, auto-mount, and make permanent. Click OK, and click OK again, and I then need to go to the Windows 10 machine. click on the little symbol on the right here and select the folder path. Then go to this PC, select the USB drive, click OK, check all these again, click OK, and then click OK again. Now, if the drive is not visible, it's because this machine is being run in a virtual environment. We need to reboot the Windows 10 machine, and only after we reboot the machine will we be able to see that particular drive. Now, one thing I also want to let you know is when we created the payloads, we had set the encryption to no, and I'll show you the importance of that in a short while. But once we reboot this machine, we'll be able to copy the game.exe file across. So let's restart this machine, and once it's restarted, we'll be able to access that USB drive on both machines. We have copied the game.exe file already to that USB drive. Now, once Windows 10 is up, we'll be able to access that drive, then copy the game.exe file across and see whether Windows Defender actually detects the malware. Now, let's go ahead and check that now. Here's Windows 10 running. Once this opens up, we'll be able to log in. Once logged in, we'll be able to browse to that particular folder. Again, it might take a short while depending on the processor speed you have, but it's not a very long wait. As we'll see now, Windows 10 will show up, the desktop will open up, and we'll be able to browse to that folder. Now, I mentioned the encryption, and you'll see why that is important. So here we have the Windows 10 machine. Let's go ahead and log in. Once logged in, we will go to this PC and browse to that folder. Let's go ahead and log into this machine, and we will go to that particular folder and make those changes to find the game.exe file. Let this load up, and once we're in, we will copy the game.exe file across. Again, it may take a short while. We're running on a virtual machine here, so it tends to take a little longer. The Windows Defender is up to date, and as you'll see, we haven't encrypted the payload. We will look at both options shortly. First, I want to show you what happens when we have the payload without any encryption. So let's go back to the folder, the Explorer here, and we browse to the folder to find that USB drive. Hopefully the shared drive appears this time, and once we see that folder, we'll be able to access the game.exe file. Here we go, and once that loads up, we will browse to the folder which has the USB drive. So I click on this PC, and within this PC we will start seeing the appropriate folders. As we'll see here, we have the I drive, which is now called E, and if I click on that, we will see the game.exe file within that folder. What I then want to do is copy that game.exe file to this machine. Let's go ahead and show you. When we go to the veil evasion again, let's just run this program. What we'll see is there are, within those options, when I go to use 34, we have something called the encryption, which is called use Furion. Now, within use Furion, you can see here we have marked it as no. That means encryption is turned off. Now, when a malware is not encrypted, chances are very high that the Windows Defender or any antivirus would know these signatures and then detect them very easily. So let's copy this to our Windows machine. And if I paste this, let's try and run this program. When I open this program, let me double click on it, and we should be prompted with a message saying something along the lines that this is a virus of some sort. If Windows Defender is up to date, we see here successfully because the file contains a virus or potentially unwanted software. That means Windows Defender, as we can see in the bottom right, malware has been detected. As we had not used the encryption, this was easily, very easily detected by Windows Defender on this Windows 10 machine. Now, a skilled hacker would not be using the payload without the encryption. A skilled hacker would be ensuring that the payload is run with a encryption mechanism in place. So what we've done here is just created a simple payload with the encryption off. Now we'll go ahead and create the payload again with the encryption on. So to put the encryption on, we'll copy this use variant. Let's copy that, and we simply put in the option Y next to it, and that will give us the encryption on. So if I click on options again, we will see that the options, it says yes, I need to put in the IP address again. So we need to set the L host to the IP address we had previously, 192.168.56.101. Now we have all these settings. Under options, we will see that the architecture is 32, and let's have a look here. It says compile to exe. It has the L host, it has the L port, and it has use variant as yes. Don't worry about 32-bit. 32-bit will work on a 64-bit machine, so we are good to go. And then we'll create the payload again. Now let's go ahead and generate the payload with encryption. So I simply type in generate here, and we go ahead and create the new payload. So generate and enter, and we will be presented with a screen again. This time we'll call the base name game encrypted, and actually let me change that to game encrypt. And what we'll do here is we'll run with 1 again, same process of getting the exe file so we can see the different results. I'll wait for this to create the payload, and then we'll go through the same process of copying it to the root folder, moving it to the USB drive, and then moving it to our Windows 10 machine. So I've exited Veil. Now we go to the folder which we copied previously, and we want to copy this to the root directory. Once that is in the root directory, we should see it appear on the left-hand side here. If I just refresh, we'll see it's listed here. I want to copy or download it to the USB drive. Once that has downloaded, we need to go to our Windows 10 machine, and we will go to the USB drive again. Within that folder, we will see the game encrypt. We want to copy this to our documents folder, for example. And let's paste the file here. And once we've pasted it in, let's look at what happens in the next video when we attempt to run this particular